if you watch the show, listen to the show regularly, we can kind of make the normal college football media seem like USA yesterday in a way, because a lot of what we talk about here eventually comes to play out in the theater of the mainstream college football media. So tonight, I'm going to get you guys a good 5 months ahead of the old-fashioned mainstream narrative. These schedules this year are a joke. Specifically looking at you, SEC, I know good and well you guys have people tasked with this sort of thing. These are probably good-hearted folks, salt of the earth, except that I'm holding in my hands some of these schedules for this year. We're not leading the show with it. I'm going to bury it a little bit deeper, but my goodness. This is one of those classic you got one job sort of things. And even if you guys don't just have one job, you failed at this portion of it. We're jam-packed. We're high atop a transitioning downtown Nashville, Tennessee. Still patches of snow on the ground, yet I'm looking at the app and it says 71 degrees for a high day after tomorrow. So spring, I promised you it would eventually get here. I cannot promise you spring games will get here, but I promised you spring would get here. Happy to be here. Got a lot to talk about tonight. I'm going to engage in some foolish activity. Dare I even say some clickbait activity? I always tell you, if I'm going to clickbait you, I'll let you know. I'm letting you know tonight. I'm going to clickbait you a little bit. But not to start the show. To start the show, we've done a lot of program rankings lately. It dawned on us we just need to do college football program rankings. So you know how we blend that. And if you don't know, I'll tell you in a second. But we're going to do that. I gotta take issue with something one of you said about television executives. These people have no one else to defend them. I have to speak up a time or two per year. But we'll keep it real in the process. And also, there is some buzz from a program that is over there in the college football ditch. It's just been left for dead, and it's moving. I see movement in the extremities there, so it's not quite dead yet. All of that and more. We are jam-packed tonight. They're watching us in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Jeffersonville, Indiana, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and Winchester, Virginia. Thank you guys so much. Quick programming note as we get into tonight's show. We're going to have a Tuesday show instead of a Thursday show this week. Why? Because I have to travel later this week. Don't necessarily think I need to tell you what for, but I am traveling later this week. So we're going to do a show Tuesday night. That's it. That's all. Let's dive into tonight's show, shall we? So around this time every year, I like to give out our top 12 college football programs. Now, when we've looked at this over the last few weeks, I've told you several times how I define a program. Some people like to go all time. I don't really care what you did in 1937, at least as it relates to judging you in the here and now. But when we measure a program, what I'm looking at is like a rolling 4-year blend, and I care about how good you are at acquiring talent. I care about how much you're winning on the field. I care about how deep your resource pool is. How stable is your program? When you get the talent, how good are you at developing that talent? And so I'm looking around the country, and I thought, at least for the time being, we have 12 teams in the college football playoff. So instead of doing a top 5 or a top 10, let's go top 12. But that's not fun enough. We could just do a normal countdown. I could tell Colin go from 12 to 1. I could tell Colin go from 1 to 12. How about this? Because all of you have your own list. So I'm going to look over here at the live chat. Just give me some teams that you think would be in the top 12 of college football program rankings over the last several years. I'll tell you where I have them. Like, there's one immediate. So Alabama's in there immediately. I got Alabama at number 5 in the program rankings right now. They're only down at 5 because of the roster churn, which was directly related to the coaching churn. So you cannot have had Nick Saban as your head coach and then lose him and not have it disproportionately impact your overall standing as a program. Because one of the things that we measure is program stability. Now, having said that, boy, that's like a first world problem because they've still got 2 SEC titles and 2 playoff trips over the past 4 years. They've still got a really, really good talent roster. They are tied for being the number 1 recruiter in the SEC over the past 4 years with Georgia. They just had their first non-double-digit win season in quite a while last year, and that was a 9-win season. So this isn't predictive. I'm not talking about where I think Alabama's going under Kalen DeBoer. This is the here and now. I would put them at number 5 in the overall program rankings. And again, that's not looking at the previous 3 years the same as I would if Saban was there. If Saban was still there and they just gone 9-4, they'd probably still be the number 1 program in the country. or 2 at worst, just because of how much I value the past 4 years as opposed to the most recent year. That's the difference in a program and a team. Ohio State on there. Okay, so Ohio State, it's a good time to get to them. I've got Ohio State at number 2. I'm going to put these over here, if you don't mind, so I can see them. I've got Ohio State at number 2 in the program rankings right now. They've got 4 straight 11-win seasons. Of course, they just won the national championship. Where you have to knock them ever so slightly is they don't have conference championships mixed in there because they couldn't get there because they keep getting beat by Michigan. That's factored in here. That's why they're not the number 1 overall program. They've been the best recruiter in the Big Ten over the past 4 years, elite program and organizational structure, so they've got everything else. The big knock on Ohio State has been, well, you keep losing to Michigan. Michigan would be ahead of Ohio State, except that there's been a little churn there, kind of like there has been at the top with Alabama. We talked about this when I did the Big Ten program rankings. That's what barely edged Ohio State, because this is not teams. So this is not just we're going to value head-to-head and that's it. We're talking about the standing of your program. And the other hard thing about that is sometimes you've got one program that's had success against another one. Michigan's had success recently against Ohio State. But I'm not just judging you against them. I'm judging you against the totality of the sport. I'll get to Michigan in a little while. We already hashed this out, I think, last Thursday, Jesse. Didn't we do it last Thursday? So I got Ohio State there at number 2. Notre Dame, who just played Ohio State in the national championship game. Where'd I have Notre Dame? Okay, I've got them down at 7. Again, down at 7, relatively speaking. Notre Dame is 44-11 the last 4 years. They've gone 11 wins, 9 wins, 10 wins, 14 wins. Okay, so they're getting it done on the field very clearly. They've got 4 straight top 12 recruiting classes. So they've done a great job, they've done a very, very good job, just below great, of getting really good talent in there. But think about the development. Think about the overall organizational buy-in, the structure, the culture, all the things that have to do with talent once you acquire it. They're A+ in all of those categories. They feel closer to being Tier 1 now than they have in the last several years to me. You've got one of the brightest young head coaching names leading your program, and Marcus Freeman. Now, here's what's happening up there. Again, this is not baked into this ranking, but for futuristic purposes, or purpi, the plural of purpose, as we've established on this show, they're starting to have some of their big names get plucked. Lose a general manager here, lose a defensive coordinator there. Okay, that's a consequence of success. You will never win at this level without losing guys because everyone wants what you have. So the NFL, Cincinnati Bengals wanted what you had. USC wanted what you had. Okay, so now we find out organizationally how strong is it moving forward. But as for the here and now, I got Notre Dame at number 7. There's Georgia. So someone said Georgia. That's my number 1 program. Georgia's been the number 1 program in the country. Georgia is the number 1 program in college football right now to me. You're looking at the last 4 years. You got 2 national championships baked in there. Clearly no one else has done that. A couple of conference titles. They just won the SEC this past year in what most Georgia fans would consider a down year. I consider Georgia having been a little bit down this past year, which is how you know you're really, really rolling as a program. It's like someone asks, how'd you do this year? Dude, we sucked. I mean, we won the SEC, but we were off a little bit. We just didn't have our fastball this year. It's an elite talent acquisition program. They're right there at the top with Alabama over the past 4 years as being the top recruiter in the conference. Their staff has been very strong organizationally. People continue to try and pluck from them because they've been the model organization, sort of the standard bearer along with Alabama in the conference and in college football over the past several years. So I got Georgia as the number 1 program in college football. I just saw Clemson in the live chat. Colin, where do I have Clemson? They're in here. I've got Clemson at number 11 in the top 12 college football program rankings over the past 4 years. They've won 2 of the last 3 ACC titles, okay? There's been a lot of talk about them slipping. Well, they have slipped. It's accurate. They've slipped down to 11. They're not out of the top 12. There aren't 12 programs better than them in college football over the past 4 years. They've averaged a 10-win season. You're going to push back on that. My guess, knowing our audience, is I'm going to look at the comment section and someone's going to push back and say, yeah, they've done it in the ACC. I get that. I've accounted for that. That's why I don't have them top 10. Got them down there at number 11. They've been very good at acquiring talent. I use those words very purposefully. They've been very good. They have not been great. They have not been elite. The last 3 classes have finished outside the top 10. Clemson does not take a ton of kids because they don't lose a ton of kids. So it knocks them down a little bit, and it makes the final recruiting ranking look a little bit different than what it really is. Having said that, they've still been off the pace that they were on several years ago. But not bad, just not elite. Their on-field results, not bad, just not elite. Their staff has not been bad. It has not been elite. Now, as for the latter, I will say I think Dabo Swinney's taken some big steps with Garrett Riley a couple of cycles ago, and now hiring on the defensive side. Organizationally, they brought some guys in. I think he's taken steps there. I've got Clemson at number 11. A lot of this is not predictive. So this is a reflection of the last 4 years. Someone asked about, in fact, 5 people asked about Michigan, I see. Let's see. So Michigan Manifesto, I assume that's your first and last name in the live chat. You predicted Michigan's going to be number 6. Does anyone else out there think I have Michigan lower than number 6? Mind you, what we're talking about here, how we define program. Yeah, I got Michigan as the number 3 program in college football over the past 4 years. And they're only down that low due to the churn of losing Jim Harbaugh and losing a lot of that staff and having to retool. That counts. That matters. You kind of get knocked a little bit, just like Alabama has, losing Nick Saban in the program rankings because of that. So I've factored that in. What you can't ignore is this team has the highest winning percentage in the Big Ten over the past 4 seasons. Supreme culture, supreme development. I will get pushback on that because of the NCAA cloud and the Connor Stallions thing, but I don't know how that's going to turn out, nor do you. So I'm not even factoring that in here. If there's something to that, if there's a lot to that, we'll find out, and we can circle back. We can revisit this in the summer. I assume we'll know by then. But in the meantime, you got 3 Big Ten championships and a national championship there. You've got, in the down year they just had, wins over Ohio State and Alabama to end the year. So Michigan's been really good. I can't knock them down too far. They're at number 3, and they lost a Hall of Fame head coach in the process. So in a lot of ways, these rankings are credits to Alabama and Michigan for being, what I have, Bama number 5. I got Michigan number 3. You lose Saban, you lose Harbaugh, you stay number 5, number 3, respectively. You're doing something right there. That's not predictive. I said that 3 times now. This is not predictive. If Sharon Moore crashes and burns at Michigan, if it's not even reaching another double-digit win season, well, okay, the future rankings will reflect that, but I don't know the future. It sucks. I wish I did. But not even the model knows where they're headed. Okay, someone asked about Oregon over there. Got Oregon at number 6 in the program rankings. They've got 4 straight double-digit win seasons. Some of that was in the Pac-12. Rest in peace. And recently, that's in the Big Ten. They just won the Big Ten championship. Elite talent acquisition program. They really, really aggressively go after guys in the portal and get them, and they're difference makers. You go back and watch that Ohio State win from earlier this year, and look at the guys making plays. Dylan Gabriel's the one throwing the ball. Evan Stewart's the one catching the ball. So they've been really good at that, but also they've got deep resources, which for some odd reason is used pejoratively against them. Like, everyone knows what wins in college football, and it is money. It's just a little bit more in your face now. And then Oregon goes and acquires talent, and they win on the field, and for some reason, the more insecure corners of the internet say, well, yeah, but they've got Nike. You're selling their program for them when you do that. Lanning's got to sit up there and smile. If he's secure in himself, which I assume he is, I would think Dan Lanning just sits back, puts his hands behind his head and smiles and say, keep trashing us. If the worst you can do against us is saying, well, Oregon's got Nike. The Nike wins are in Oregon sales. They look back and they say, yep. Is every high school kid listening to the haters out there? Yep, sure is. So that's part of what makes them as a program. How am I going to knock that? Also, I have this bold theory that a lot of you complain about that because you wish your program had that. I can't do anything to change it. We don't have that at Pate State. We got here, as Mary Chapin Carpenter would say, the hard way. But Oregon, look, think about the disadvantages that Oregon should have. It is a program tucked away in the Pacific Northwest where you have to travel 1,000 miles for the best 4-star, usually, and you're trying to compete against a team in Southern California, a bunch of teams in the Midwest, close to major population centers, and a bunch of teams in Texas and the South. So for all the disadvantage that Oregon should have, for all of the way the tables of the sport should be tilted against them, when I put the Nike bowling ball on the table, I don't look at it as tipping it way in their favor. I look at it as more balancing the table back out, maybe a slight tilt in Oregon's favor. They still have a lot that they have to work against. You know, that's the way I've always viewed Oregon. I think the sport may have changed a little bit, where it's come to them a little bit, but they're as aggressive as any organization and any staff in the country at taking advantage of that too. So Oregon at number 6. Texas, yeah, okay. We have not thrown Texas in here yet. I got Texas at number 4 in the overall college football program rankings right now. 25 wins the last 2 seasons. Now, the difference with Texas is if you go back over 4 years, there's a losing season baked in there because Sark had just gotten there. But my thinking with this is I'll disproportionately weight the most recent thing I've seen because Steve Sarkisian is, the one responsible for it, and he's going to be there. Just like with Alabama or Michigan, I may knock you a little bit because a vast majority of the 4-year sample size was due to a head coach that's no longer there, if that makes any sense. They're stacking talent. They've got 4 top 6 classes in a row. If you'll notice, this is futuristic, but if you'll notice the names they keep adding there organizationally, top notch. They're loaded, but yet they haven't won anything. And so they keep loading up. Oregon's the same way. There's no national championship in the recent history. Ohio State, until 5 minutes ago, was that way. It's like they'd rank really high on these lists, but you do have the guy on the street corner of college football who's going to look at him and say, yeah, but what have they won? This is the guy who thinks if you haven't won a national championship, you haven't won anything. I don't necessarily traffic in that kind of thought, but some people do. And they're very loud. They're very vocal. So Texas knows that. Oregon knows that. Ohio State knew that. And so there's this different hunger and energy and kind of even a starvation, not just hunger, a starvation for tasting what Georgia has tasted, Alabama's tasted, Ohio State now just tasted it, Michigan tasted it recently. I believe in Texas, man. They're as high as you can be without having won any of the conference or playoff hardware that these other teams have won ahead of them. Now, someone said Ole Miss. I do have Ole Miss in here. I've got Ole Miss as number 12 in the college football program rankings over the last 4 years because 3 of those years they've got 10-plus win seasons in there. Kiffin, do you know how long he's been there? How long do you feel like Lane Kiffin's been at Ole Miss? Because he's been there over half a decade now. He's entering year 6. And after the first year, they've been flying pretty high. It's a high-level talent acquisition program, but it's not an elite recruiting program. They've done the thing a little bit more with the portal than with recruiting. They've just been really good at it, and they've finished inside the playoff committee top 14 3 of the last 4 years. So they've been right there at the end. I think they had a huge missed opportunity this past year. Huge missed opportunity. That team had no business missing the playoff this past year. And as we'll show you later in the show, they have no business missing the playoff this upcoming year. Time will tell. We'll see. Penn State. Okay, someone said, where's Penn State? Penn State's number 9. I got Penn State. James Franklin there is the number 9 program in college football over the last 4 years. It's just a lot of really good. I'm looking, so I've got Penn State's resume in front of me, how I would describe Penn State. There's a whole lot of really, really good. They've got 3 double-digit win seasons in the past 4 years. That's really, really good. They've got 4 top 15 classes. Really, really good. Their staff strength has, to me, continued to kind of improve. It's been really, really, really good. At no point would you have called any of these Penn State teams elite. None of their staffs I would have called elite, like top 5 in the country. I wouldn't have called any of these recruiting classes elite. Whatever one notch is below that, that's where Penn State's been virtually across the board. Organizationally, I think there's probably a little more tangible buy-in up there, or maybe more commitment up there behind the scenes than there may have been 4 years ago. Scratch that. There's no doubt about that. James Franklin and everyone would attest to that. Now, they got more yeses than they were getting 4 years ago. So They're right there at number 9. The only thing they haven't had is that classic big win. Hadn't beaten Ohio State, the win over Michigan, the win that you could have gotten over Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. They were one step away from playing for the national championship this past year. Now, the detractor amongst us would look at it and say, yeah, but how was it any different than seasons prior? And then, the pro-Penn Stater would say, what do you mean? They were one step away from the national championship game. They made the playoff. Penn State hasn't been doing these things, and, on the surface, that's true. But then the detractor would come back in the room. He would say, yeah, semantically, that's correct. But if you really think about it, they didn't do anything more than they've previously done. They didn't beat Ohio State. Ohio State just dropped the ball to where Penn State backed into the Big Ten championship game. Penn State didn't beat Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, so they didn't win the conference. And then Penn State got in the playoff and they beat SMU. Of course they did. They beat Boise. Of course they did. They've been beating those caliber teams. But when they finally went up against the Notre Dame, they didn't win that game. So they didn't beat anyone they weren't supposed to beat. So what did they do that they haven't been doing? It's a valid take on the thing. I think this past year's Penn State team was roughly the equivalent in quality of the previous couple of years. It's just inches here and inches there, and that's what has them top 10, but not top 5 as a program. There are so many rungs they could fall. There are a couple of more rungs they could climb. That's Penn State football right now. That's not a knock, that's a compliment. Tennessee, yeah, they're in here. Tennessee's at number 8. I just saw a couple of programs that aren't in here, but I will list the ones that are. So I got Tennessee at 8. 30 wins the last 3 seasons. Tennessee's back to mattering nationally. Not back to being elite. They're still a step away from that, just like Penn State. We were talking about them. They're a step away from that. Difference with Tennessee is they've got a couple of wins over the big boys. Like they've beaten Bama 2 of the last 3 times. That is Tennessee's Ohio State. They have been able to beat them 2 of the last 3 times. And that's a big deal because they had gone like 15 years without doing that. They've got 3 straight top 15 classes. Josh Heupel, clearly the answer there, which is wild because everyone will act like they knew that was coming. And everyone will act like they knew Danny White was the unicorn athletic director hire. People didn't know that. People didn't know that. When Heupel got hired there was talk around UCF that if he went one more year not getting it done, he may be on the hot seat there. No one tells that story the right way. Josh Heupel came there, and not only have they won, not only has he steadied and righted the ship, and it's gained some speed, but think about this past year. I was in Hot Springs, Arkansas last weekend for the Broyles Award ceremony, which goes to the top assistant coach in the country every year. And Tim Banks was there. So you hear that and you say, okay, a Tennessee coordinator was a Broyles Award finalist. That's not the wildest headline in the world. Well, that's not the way you should write the headline. The way you should write the headline was Josh Heupel's defensive coordinator was a finalist for the Broyles Award. That's a big deal. That's really transformational. That's when transformational things are starting to happen with your program, when the side of the ball that you don't specialize in starts to really catch up to the side you do specialize in. I am watching USC very closely to see if the same thing happens out there. Someone asked about Miami. No, I do not have Miami in here. Miami is on the outside looking in. Florida State on the outside looking in. Oklahoma's not in here. Do you see anyone else? A&M, yeah, A&M's not in here either. But LSU was just mentioned. LSU is in here. LSU is the number 10 program in college football right now, last 4 years. They got 29 wins the last 3 years. They had a lot of churn a couple of cycles ago. Brian Kelly, LSU in general, realized we are bad defensively. They had probably the worst defensive staff in the SEC. That's the bad news. The good news is they rectified it in a big way. They spared no expense. They just completely overhauled their defensive staff. They made the right moves. Unfortunately, they didn't do it quickly enough, and they wasted Jaden Daniels' Heisman season. And in no world did I ever think LSU would have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback and not do anything of note in the postseason because defense held them back, but that's where they were. So that's baked into all this. But outside that, they got 2 double-digit win seasons in here. They won 9 games last year. They've got 4 top 12 classes. Brian Kelly is an established track record guy. And again, I'm not advocating for them to be top 5. Number 10, I think, is right where LSU should be pegged. So I think we just went 12 deep, Colin. So let's throw it up here. All right, this is, I'm going to tweet this out simultaneous to me repeating this on air. If you're listening to the podcast and it's like Monday morning where you are, I want you to, you may not even be able to hear this, but like 3, 2, 1, boom. When I just hit post, chaos will ensue. Because the people seeing that are seeing it during the live show, which means they're not watching the show, which means they probably missed the entire explainer. But here we are. Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Texas, Alabama. That's your top 5. Oregon, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Penn State, LSU. That's your next 5. And got Clemson and Ole Miss. Now, producer Jesse asked me, do you want to give the next 4 out? And I said, we are not the selection committee. We are not doing that. We went 12 deep, okay? Normally, we would have gone like 5 or 10 deep. So if you couldn't make the top 12, keep trying. This will look different this time next year. And in the meantime, if I don't see you again, keep trucking. Academy Sports and Outdoors, one-stop shop for gear for all of these programs. And you know what? Even some programs that weren't there. Academy.com, now, I have been asked to remind you, is there for you. If you live in Bismarck, and for all I know, they may have one there, but let's just say you live in somewhere in the country where they don't have an Academy Sports and Outdoors around the corner. Academy.com is there. It's impossible for you to be watching to or listening to the show if you don't have internet. If you've got internet, you can go to academy.com and you can order this, that, and the other. And we appreciate them because back before our show really blew up, Academy came in and they said, we believe in that show and we want to be the partner with that show. And I said, do you really? Are you sure? And then they proved that they watched the show, as they still do occasionally via text message to this day. So Academy's been with us. Classic ride or die partner there. That's the only kind we have around here. Let's continue. I led the show off. Let me get a little drink of water here. I led the show off by telling you there is really, really some ridiculousness in the scheduling landscape this year. I'm about to prove it. We have the receipts right here next to me. I don't know whose water this is. I just grabbed it. It doesn't make me mad, but this aggravates me. Okay, Colin, here's a good endpoint for you. I was looking at the SEC schedules this year. It's so warped. I don't know how we get to this point. I'm a believer. Like when I'm the college football commissioner, I don't even want conferences announcing the schedule for that year until March. I would wait until spring to do it, but I'm not elected yet. So in the meantime, we already know, for instance, the SEC schedule this year. I'm gonna do you a little favor right here. We have our own internal metrics, the way we determine strength of schedule. I kind of went over this last show. If you didn't listen to the last show, give it a listen. It'll make a lot more sense. But if you don't have time to do that, just know I spelled out last show kind of our formula, a basic formula for determining strength of opponents and whatnot. So as we see it right now, entering spring, of course, this is subject to change. Some of the toughest schedules in the SEC are Oklahoma. We got Oklahoma, Florida, Arkansas, Alabama. Like those are the 4 toughest schedules by our formula in the conference this year. To give you an idea, like if I were to go down some losers, some teams that lost when it comes to the schedule maker in the SEC, Florida is certainly one of them. They got the number 2 toughest schedule based on our system, but Miami and Florida State are total wild cards here. So you're listening to this and saying, well, they're not in the SEC. What does that have to do with anything? They're not. But Florida plays both of them. So we would quantify those as either Tier 1 or Tier 2 opponents. But as you well know, Florida State could be hot garbage this year or win 11 games. What caliber of opponent are they going to be? They're all the way down here at the end of the season, too, so we don't know. So that's one wild card baked into Florida's schedule. The other one is they play at Miami in Week 4. No one knows what Miami's going to be. So those are 2 wild cards. Outside of that, Florida's got a couple of back-to-back road spots, LSU, Miami, and then later on in the season, Kentucky, Ole Miss. And really, those are 3 games in a row that are away from home. They go to Jacksonville, then they go to Lexington, then they go to Oxford. At LSU, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Got Miami, got A&M, Ole Miss. It's just a tough schedule. And wait till you see how this compares to some of the lighter schedules in the conference. Oklahoma, I think, may have the toughest schedule. I know I just showed you our numbers, and if I didn't know our numbers, I would just look at Oklahoma's schedule and I would say, this is brutality. They have 9 games against Tier 1 or Tier 2 opponents, as we would define them. That's the most in college football. No one has a tougher schedule than Oklahoma, to me, this year in college football. Now, they've got 3 very soft games. So Kent State, they go to Temple somehow. They play Illinois State. Because they have those on there, someone's going to pick and choose and decide to make fun of that. Yeah, you could throw a couple of more high school teams on there for all I care. They've got Michigan out of conference. They play this stretch where they have Texas and South Carolina and Ole Miss and Tennessee and Bama. Only one of those games is in Norman. And even if they were all there, they'd still be tough. They end the season. Look at how they end the season. Just listen to this if you're listening on pod. Texas in Dallas, at South Carolina, Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Alabama, Missouri, LSU. Boom. It's just body blow after body blow after body blow. Alabama doesn't have an easy schedule this year. And they've got a couple out-of-conference opponents that are wild cards. They play at Florida State to start the season. It's not a neutral site game. They play at Florida State. Florida State, I think, debuting the brand-new stadium renovations and whatnot, whatever that means in a point spread. Probably a solid quarter of a point there, the old Doak bump. But they also play Wisconsin at home. So a very legitimate out-of-conference schedule for Alabama. They play 3 games versus Tier 1 teams. They play 3 more versus Tier 2 teams. And 4 of the 5 versus those Tier 2 teams are on the road. Excuse me, I should have said that. They play 5 Tier 2 teams, and 4 of those 5 games are on the road. They also go to Georgia this year. There is no spot on Alabama's schedule where they have a big bye advantage or a disproportionate rest advantage. The rest disadvantage is actually against them. They go to Missouri in week 6 or 7, and Missouri's off a bye. So Bama's got a pretty tough schedule this year as well. Now, if you flip it and you talk about some of the easier schedules in the SEC, think about how different this is. There's such a vast canyon between the Floridas and Oklahomas of the world and some of these teams that have the easier schedules this year. Texas A&M and LSU and Georgia, yeah, they're like 9, 10, 11. Tennessee, to me, has the most workable schedule of any team in this conference this year. And here's what's wild. They play Georgia and Alabama. So you're always grading on a curve when you're going to play a league schedule in the SEC, but there's no Texas here. There's no Ole Miss. There's no South Carolina. There's no LSU, no A&M, no Missouri, no Auburn. They got 8 games versus Tier 4 teams or lower. And 3 of the 4 hardest games Tennessee plays, they will have a scheduling advantage. So, if anyone wants to lay a little early money over at FanDuel on a team that's got a little value baked in, Tennessee, the last thing you saw of them is them getting run out of Columbus, Ohio. And everyone will be down on Tennessee. Buddy, that is a schedule to take advantage of if you're Josh Heupel. Ole Miss has got one again. Ole Miss has got a very workable schedule. They leave home only one time. Ole Miss leaves home once before October 18th, and it's to go to Kentucky. They got Georgia State and then the trip to Kentucky. Then they got Arkansas, Tulane, LSU. Somehow Washington State comes to Ole Miss this year. Now, granted, when they do have to leave home again, it's to go to Athens, Georgia. But in the meantime, they go half the season without a road trip outside of one to Kentucky. Now, don't take that as me dismissing Kentucky, because I remember what happened last year when they came to the Grove. I understand what could happen there. But scheduling-wise, how could you set it up any better if you were Lane Kiffin? They've got a bye on November 22nd. You notice Colin's got the schedule up if you're watching on YouTube. You see down here it's got Florida, and then it's got at Mississippi State. Do you notice one of those is 11-15, and the next one is 11-29? Why is that gap there? Well, it's there because there's a bye week there. It's very strange because their bye week is the second to last week of the season, which may mean nothing if they don't go to Atlanta. However, if they do go to Atlanta, Think about what kind of advantage that potentially gives Ole Miss against a team like Georgia that may be playing their 5th or 6th game in a row. If you think that doesn't matter, this past year it happened. It happened in the Big Ten. Oregon had a really, really late season bye week, and they made the conference title game. And you're just fresher. It matters. There's no way to absolutely guard against that, but it matters. Texas, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Texas has got a very workable schedule this year. The schedule makers in the SEC have shafted Oklahoma as it relates to Texas. Like, the strength of schedule dynamic and disparity between one versus the other has been a joke for the first 2 years that they've been in this league. There are 4 SEC teams that we have as tier 4 or lower. Texas plays all of them this year. They go to Ohio State in week 1. That's actually what boosts the strength of schedule and makes it look tougher than it is. And I'm not knocking a trip to Ohio State. That's a really big deal. But you don't have to beat Ohio State to win this conference. They've got the easiest conference schedule in this league. They go to Florida, they go to Georgia. It's not easy. I said it's the easiest in the SEC. And you compare that to what Oklahoma's got to play or what Florida's got to play. You look at what Ole Miss is dealing with compared to what Bama's dealing with. It's like different worlds. And somehow these are all league schedules. These are all conference schedules. And sure enough, we'll get to the end of the year and someone out there will be yelling, well, you are what your record says you are. Just win your games, you know. Yeah, I do know. They're all trying to win their games. Some of them are just having a lot tougher time doing it than the others. And it's because the league schedule in the SEC makes no sense whatsoever. Let's move along. I'm going to go as far away from the SEC as I can here because I need to talk about something very important and very pressing. Eric from Long Beach, California hit me and said, all you do is trash USC, which, as we all know, is completely ridiculous. But he continues, we're rolling on the recruiting trail, and the structure of our program looks much better than it did. What do you mean much better than it did, Eric? Are you suggesting that USC football has been down? You sound like you're trashing USC. Anyway, I continue. He said, I'm sure you'll scoff at it, but I think USC is heading towards big things moving forward. I'll wait to hear your dumb retort. Hate State. Eric checking in from Hate State. I have a baked-in internal seismograph about myself. I'm sure you think the same way. It's not weird at all. There's this thing that's baked into us, with college football at least, and it's the thing where you notice there's a little activity over here, and it's like the seismograph. It starts peaking. You know, like a geologist would look for earthquakes. It just starts peaking a little bit. And it's happening internally with me when it comes to USC right now. So Eric is a hater, but he's not wrong. He's wrong about everything characterizing me, but he's not wrong that some stuff's happening at USC. You may or may not be aware, folks, that USC's got the #1 recruiting class in the country for 2026. Save it. Save your breath. I know how it goes. In fact, it really wouldn't matter who we were talking about there. If I tell you someone's got an impressive-looking class for 2026, there is going to be a chorus. There is going to be a rainstorm of takes, and they all sound like this. It won't last. They'll all decommit. Okay. You know how we handle that game on here, but I'm not even going to mess with how we handle it tonight. I just want to tell you, I think it's a little bit different at USC. My own internal seismograph is peaking a little bit. So there's some activity happening out here with USC. I want to say this now. I told Jesse and Colin it is, February 23rd. I want to choose tonight, February 23rd, to tell you that no one cares about USC right now. USC's an afterthought nationally. No one's talking about him. So I want to talk about him for a second because I really, really believe that this is the moment, as crazy as it sounds, because their record has gotten worse the last 3 years. The energy externally around the program's gotten worse the last 3 years. This moment right here is where I actually want to buy USC. I feel better about the future of that program right now, coming off 6-6 year, than I have in a long time. It's real. It's not going to be talked about nationally for a while, but there's some stuff happening inside that program that's real, it's tangible, it's not smoke and mirrors, it's not acting, it's not performative, it's not winning a spring national championship or anything like that. The right people are in the building. That's really what matters. That's what it comes down to with everyone who wins in this sport. The right people are in the building. What I feel about Lincoln Riley is that Lincoln Riley is still the real deal. Lincoln Riley didn't forget about this game. Lincoln Riley didn't forget how to win. I think what happened is Lincoln Riley had a couple of things happen to him at USC. One was his fault, one wasn't. He handcuffed himself to a losing defensive staff. To his credit, he rectified that a couple of years in. And last year started to yield results. I think this year and in years to come, it'll really start to yield results. And he defined that he wanted to change entirely the identity of the program. Perfect world, you do that the moment you step on campus and day one when you take the job. That's not the way it happened. So that's his fault. To his credit, he took ownership and then they started to press the right buttons, I think, on that front last year. And they're still doing that. And then the second thing that was a little out of his control is I think administratively he was handcuffed. I don't think he ever stepped to a podium and said that, but I'll say it. I don't think he's gotten everything that he's needed out there. I think sometimes you find yourself wearing 3 or 4 hats, whereas at places like Ohio State or places like Georgia, they're just well-oiled machines, and you can just take it for granted that you've got someone in this seat to do this and someone in that seat to do that. That hadn't been the case at USC. So think about college football. College football kind of changed overnight. What the portal did, what NIL did to this sport changed it overnight, but not every program adjusted overnight. And it's not just up to you, the head coach. Your administration has to be on board. And in some places, they got it. Boom. And they were immediately at the forefront. But not everyone adjusted at the same speed. And USC just sucked at the speed with which they adjusted to the changing landscape of college football, to the point where only just now are they getting the buy-in administratively and the sign-off administratively to get the right people in the building. But make no mistake, they've got the right people in the building now. I don't know that they're done with that overhaul, but they've got the right people walking in the building now. So everyone will scoff. Colin, rare request. Could you put the question back up for a second that Eric asked? He used a word there. Eric said, they're doing big things, but he was sure I'll scoff at it. I'm not scoffing at it. I 100% agree with you. As hateful as you were, Eric, I 100% agree with you. I'm not scoffing at it. But when we put this individual clip out on the YouTube channel, most people will scoff at it. So I want everyone to take note, especially my friends on the peristyle over there. They will still scoff at it. You have not earned benefit of the doubt. USC has not earned benefit of the doubt in the college football public's mind. So you can look at it right now and say, boy, look at the new administrative hires we've made. There is a palpable energy around this program. I've never been more sure since Lincoln Riley's been here that we're moving in the right direction. And I share that sentiment with you, by the way. Just understand, not that this should matter, but it will not be reflected nationally. Because USC has not earned benefit of the doubt in anyone's mind. You hadn't won anything of note since Lincoln Riley's been there. So no one's going to look and say, oh, yeah, all right, he's done it before. He'll do it again there. He hadn't done it before. He hadn't done it there yet. You hadn't done it there yet. So no one thinks that you're Oregon right now. No one thinks you could tote Ohio State's jock right now because you haven't been able to. So I do believe that some very special things are around the corner at USC. They just came off a year where they barely made a bowl game. I believe in the future of the program more than I did this time a year ago, even. Not everyone will think that way. So there will be scoffers. I'm just not one of them. I'm in with you guys. I'm in. I believe in it. So I wanted Eric to know that from me to him personally. They're watching us in Wetumpka, Alabama, or as we call that, the Los Angeles of the Yellowhammer State. Burbank, California is tuned in. Huber Heights, Ohio is tuned in. Let's continue to move merrily along. What is Garrett talking about in the live chat here? Terrible format? Is he talking about our format? Well, Garrett, you're choosing to watch the show, my friend. I appreciate you doing it, but if the format is not to your liking, the exit door is one click away, I guess. Oh, he's talking about the CFB. Garrett, I apologize wholeheartedly. I love you. You love everything about this show. Yeah, the playoff can take a hike. In fact, we're going to talk about something along those lines in a little while. So there we go. I have an admission. I don't necessarily like what we're about to do. I am on record as saying this. But Jeff hit me from Augusta. And Jeff said, I won't hold you to these. But your early predictions last year gave me some good insight on the season. Do you have some early conference title predictions? Jeff, it is February 23rd. There is snow on the ground outside our studio, and we're in Nashville, not Yellowknife, not Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And you want conference championship predictions from me? Well, let me tell you something, Jeff. I'd be happy to. So this is a warning, because I always told you I'd give you a warning if I was ever going to clickbait you. I am not clickbait Pate, except this right here is pure foolishness. To give conference championship picks before spring ball is pure foolishness. I know it is. You know it is. Colin, when he makes the thumbnail for the segment later, he knows it is. I think Jesse knows it is. But you know what? We'll do it anyway. But just be warned, I can and will pivot off of these things at a moment's notice. ACC championship prediction. I can't even say it without laughing. ACC championship prediction you cannot hold me to legally in February. Give me Clemson over Georgia Tech. I got Georgia Tech going to the ACC championship game. Why? Because it's risk-free. No one's going to hold me to this. This has got to be Clemson's year. It's an all-in year for them. I've been very direct about how I feel about the immediate and then long-term future of Clemson football. Got no problem buying into the immediate future. I got Clemson winning the ACC this year, but I think Georgia Tech's got a good shot to meet them in Charlotte. I think Miami's got a decent shot to do that. Louisville's always a player there. Have no clue what to expect from Florida State. But Georgia Tech's no joke. Like Georgia Tech, had they beaten Georgia in that multiple overtime game, I think a lot more people would be serious about them. And in reality, it would have made no difference. But I think a lot more people would be talking about them. I like Georgia Tech a significant amount this upcoming year. Like, I think they could make some serious headway. And by that, I mean I think they could go to the conference title game. What about the SEC? I've got no Alabama and no Georgia in Atlanta. I would take LSU to win the SEC if I had to pick right now over Texas. I trust them at quarterback. They've got the 5th best odds to win the conference. As you heard me say this already, so this is not hypocrisy. I've bet them already on FanDuel, and the odds reflect that. Did I just suggest to you that I moved the number? Yes, I did. Can I prove it? No. Is it true? Probably not. But you can't prove that it's not true. So LSU over Texas would be my pick right now. I trust LSU's portal moves. Now, this is where I've just got to be right, or this could crash and burn fantastically. I better be right about their portal moves. I think I am. Their defensive staff, year 1 to year 2, love the impact down there. A quarterback situation in an ocean of uncertainty at the quarterback position. I trust Garrett Nussmeier. Texas has kind of gotten to that blind belief status with me in that they've got so much to replace, but they've got a very soft conference schedule, relatively speaking, and I just trust them to backfill. So, yeah, LSU, Texas right now would be my pre-spring pick. I cannot believe we're doing this. Big Ten. I'd put Ohio State right back there. Ohio State over Penn State. Sounds reasonable. Give me that right now. You can't view Ohio State in a vacuum. So people will look at Ohio State and they'll say, oh, how could you pick them to win the conference? Look at all they lost. Well, I don't have them competing against last year's version of themselves. They just have to compete against everyone in the Big Ten this upcoming year. So that would be Oregon and Michigan and Penn State, and I think that they can hold their own there. I trust them at quarterback. Now, they're unknown. They're unproven at quarterback. I think Julian Sain is going to be a star in college football next year, so I'm high on him. It's just I trust the program, kind of like I do with Texas. I trust the program. Penn State has the kind of vibe about them this year that Ohio State had last year, where all those guys came back. They're, at Penn State's case, they're another year older and more experienced and proven at quarterback. Well, they're more experienced, okay? Proven at the championship level, they are not yet. I think Franklin backfilled on his staff very admirably. They get Oregon at home early in the year. Look at the schedule. Colin has it up right here. Oregon, they play them week 5, actually, because they've got a bye before Oregon comes in there, and it's Oregon's like 4th or 5th straight game in a row. So Huge scheduling dynamic advantage for Penn State in one of their biggest games of the year. What we don't know is whether it'll be a whiteout game. We probably do know. It probably won't be. However, most of the time that just sucks for y'all because you can't have a whiteout game at night. But if the network of choice chooses to make you kick that game off at high noon, let's not forget that would be a 9 a.m. body time kickoff for Oregon. So could it be that we finally have a big noon advantage at Penn State? And then lastly, in the Big 12, I picked up two die, if you will. I hot aired them, I rolled them, because that is what it's like predicting the Big 12. And I came up with Texas Tech over Baylor to win this conference. That would be number 4 beating number 3. Baylor finished hot. Sawyer Robertson, big fan of him at quarterback. Texas Tech went all in the portal. And in a conference where anything goes, are there really solid favorites out here? Kansas State and Arizona State, for the record, are 1-2. Conference is impossible to peg. So give me a Texas Tech Baylor. I hope that sufficed. And you may have listened to that and said, that doesn't sound like your normal several layers worth of a breakdown. There are no layers. It's pre-spring. We don't even know who are on the teams yet. So naturally, we wanted to go down the predictive road tonight. Again, I can't believe we just did that. But there you go. Colin, I just made a face so that we could screenshot it. Because down the road, I want to say that I screenshot that once we've changed the picks 47 times. All right, now on to a more substantive conversation. Need to take a sip of Zevia here. A nice, still lukewarm, but it was cold earlier when the show started. A nice, lukewarm, zero sugar sip of cream soda Zevia. They didn't even mandate that I did the exhale. I just did that on my own. Pat from beautiful Boise, Idaho. He said, you keep saying that the big brokers in college football are media executives. Do you really think they care about the sport, or do they just care about the bottom dollar? I think they care about the bottom dollar. That's what it's about. I think they care about bottom dollar, making a lot of money. But, you know, Pat, that's what you care about when you go to work as well. So it is very popular to demonize college football TV executives, or TV executives in general who are overseeing college football. I want to tell you that you shouldn't stop feeling that way. I feel that way. It pisses me off to no end what these people do to the sport sometimes. And I work with a lot of them. I know them. I could call them right now and put them on speakerphone. And who knows, maybe one day we'll have to resort to that. But what I don't think the general college football fan understands is how much your voice matters. You think it's never mattered less. I'm telling you it's never mattered more. You just don't realize why. So I'm talking to our audience. Our audience is normal college football fans. I am a normal college football fan. That's why I know how you feel about this stuff, because you feel how I feel. In fact, I get even madder than some of you guys get about it. So you have to talk me off the ledge from time to time. Here's the thing about TV executives. Most of them are not from our world. Most of them did not grow up immersed in college football. College football is not part of their DNA. The NFL is. Major League Baseball is. The NBA is. They disproportionately grew up in northern cities. They disproportionately grew up pro sports fans. And college football was kind of something they were aware of, and now they're in charge of, and they know the what, but they don't know the why. That doesn't make them bad people. It makes them uninformed people. They know the what. They could speak dollars and cents. They know the television numbers, the viewership, the demographics. They know that stuff better than you do. They could run circles around you and I when it comes to describing and defining that. That's the what. What they don't know, that you and I do know, is the why. Why are those numbers so big? They could tell you, oh, passion, man, people love college football. They couldn't get any deeper than that. If you really asked them to describe a Clemson fall Saturday, like if you really asked them to tangibly describe what makes a college football rivalry, like granularly describe that like we did 2 shows ago, I think it was, they'd be lost. They know that. They know that. I know because I know a lot of these folks. And they admittedly get a little insecure when they're in those kinds of conversations because they don't know. The good news is ignorance is not always ill will. Just because some of these folks who are making big decisions that affect this sport are not necessarily as knowledgeable about the sport as you and I, does not mean they have ill will towards the sport. It doesn't mean that they have, diabolical aspirations to tear the sport apart. They just don't know. Here's where your voice comes in. This I can assure you of. Conversations as recently as this past week have reaffirmed my belief that I've never been more sure that the college football fan's voice matters. More so now than it ever has. But you listen to me say that and you say, I don't believe that. Because there have never been more changes happening to this sport that I don't like than there are right now. I don't push back on that. I don't like them either. I'm right there with you guys. I don't like a lot of them either. But your voice matters because of this. Think about it in any walk of life. It could be college football. It could be your own place of business. It could be your family. It could be your dating life. Whatever it is, ask yourself this. When is a person most likely to seek feedback? And the answer to that is normally when they're the least informed. Now, if they're insecure, then they're not going to do that. So you have to hope these are people that are pretty secure. These are 7-figure, 8-figure per year earners, so they're pretty financially secure. They want what's best for business. College football flourishing is what's best for business, long term. Short term, you could cut corners, make a quick buck at the expense of the future of the sport, but long-term earnings are going to be tied to college football flourishing, which is tied to you being happy with the product and you continuing to tune in. Every television executive wants that. Everybody who runs a company that owns college football media rights deals wants that. A lot of them don't know college football and what makes it great. They know that it is great. They know that it is profitable, but they couldn't beat themselves intellectually out of a wet paper bag when it comes to describing why it's great. But that doesn't make them bad people. That doesn't mean they have ill will towards the sport. It just makes them uninformed, which means if they're worth their salt and they're uninformed on something that they hold in their hand, they want to be informed about it, which makes your voice really important. Makes a show like this really important. I know this because this is feedback I got this past week from some very important people. And what they said is, I learn a lot from watching that show, from looking at the Twitter interactions that you guys have. Some of them you show on your show. Some of them you do yourself in your own social feeds. I learn a lot. We comb through it. We listen to the shows. We watch the shows, not just ours, other shows as well, that feature college football diehards, P1s as they would call them in their industry. This is the moment in time where there's a lot of inflection happening, huge inflection point. Okay, and you got some people who may not know a ton about the history of college football and what makes it great and what makes you and I love it more so than any other sport out there, and they're in charge of it. They want to be informed. You got to inform them. Now, here's the follow-up to that. Just because you tell someone, if you're a Penn State fan, that what makes me love this sport is we get one game a year where we get a whiteout. And you guys are ruining it because you keep taking that game and putting it at noon. Just because that makes you mad and you express that doesn't automatically mean the powers that be are going to adjust. And it's because it's a delicate process. You put yourself in their shoes for a second, if you can imagine this. Put yourself in the shoes of a network executive at a network that holds the rights to Big Noon Kickoff, for example. You take a stand that strong, and you're taking a quick trip to the exit door. Because a lot of these places, understand this please, a lot of these places, if you took a stand that strong, if you took a stand that would cut that much into revenue, the network would not change its approach. The network would change the person that holds your chair, that holds your title. They'd just replace you. They wouldn't replace their way of thinking. You cannot do that stuff overnight. You can't take a wrecking ball to the philosophies of these places that are used to making big money off of these games that they've paid to acquire, by the way. So what you have to do is you have to look for the small wins. You have to incrementally impact change or inform change in decision-making in college football. And that is a little more tedious a process. I will grant you that. And it doesn't always make us happy. But to answer the question, No, I think most of them are worried about the bottom line. But the thing about it long term is what's best for bottom line, what's best for business in college football can't be achieved unless you're happy enough to be watching. And what I'll never do is I'll never insult your intelligence on this show, at least, enough to where I yell in your face, doesn't matter how you feel. You're going to tune in anyway. Like, what does that really mean? Like, yeah, man, a lot of us are going to watch college football almost no matter what. I really don't know. For me personally, I don't know what would have to happen for me not to watch this sport. That doesn't mean I'm happy about everything. And also, you're not gearing it towards me, per se. I'm the last one that'll be out the door. I'm at the party until the end. But if the crowd thins out from 100 to 91, and from 91 to 86, and 86 to 79, you got a problem on your hands. Just because I'm still here doesn't mean the party's not dying. So if your sport starts to erode, if some of the top layers of viewership or engagement or whatnot start to erode, you got to do a self-assessment then, instead of waiting for like the last dude to walk out the door, because by then it's much too late. Quick Trip, if you do hit the exit door and you're on your way home, Quick Trip, perfect place to gas up. And if you've already got fuel, but you're yawning, we don't want that. We don't want drowsy driving. And so the cold brew on tap inside, not to mention some really, really solid snacks. I got an itch on my nose. Place to go, man. Quick Trip, we appreciate them. They fueled the whole new Saturday tour last year, and we look forward to being in business with them for a long time to come. Got a couple of things left here. I'm going to talk about some spring football, like the concept of it in a second, because I don't think we haven't really hit that to the degree that I wanted to, immunity. First up, I had a question here. Randy hit me, and he said, hey, what are the odds Ohio State gets back and they go deep in the playoff again? Passing offense looks even better next year. You may be right, Randy. You may be right. Julian Sayin, I just talked about him a second ago. It's quarterback, the former five-star guy. He committed to Bama, then Saban left, and he transferred to Ohio State. You hadn't seen him play, probably, yet. We hadn't seen him start a full season, obviously. So he's there. Jeremiah Smith's there. Caleb Downs is still there. Got a lot of stars there. They lost a lot of star power. The nucleus of that team is gone. Chip Kelly, offensive coordinator, gone. Now, they're still loaded at wide receiver. Like I just said, I got no doubt about them at quarterback long term, but Colin is showing you a laundry list of integral pieces to that championship team that are gone. Most championship winning teams suffer that. That's the natural churn and consequence of success. But I got to be honest with you. This is a whole new world for Ohio State. This has not been a team that's been stacking national championships. They've been stacking wins, and they've been losing some big games at important moments, and they haven't been getting to the finish line and getting the job done. So now they did. And this right here is new oxygen. It's new air. It's a good thing. The consequences of success are a wonderful thing, but they are a thing. And the consequences of success are the things that only championship winners deal with. And we've seen examples of some of the best organizations in college football temporarily stubbing their toe after they win a national championship because the good old C word creeps in the door. Complacency, that's the C word in college football. And because of that, I am almost glad there's so much turnover up there. Now, they may not win a national championship this year, but I'm almost glad they lose so many players and they lose so many coaches. And you're elevating an offensive coordinator to maybe do things he's done for the first time. And you've got a lot of newness in that building because that allows me, if I'm Ryan Day, to walk into my first team meeting and look at those dudes and say, you have not done anything. Hardly any of you in here were instrumental role players in us winning a national championship last year. So this program just won a national title. I got my ring, and some of you have your rings, but what has this team done? Nothing. And what did a lot of you do on last year's team? Not a whole lot, exceptions to the rule, but the general climate in that building, because there's so much turnover, can reasonably be, this program's achieved something. What have you achieved? You haven't done anything of note. I'm almost glad there's a lot of turnover. Like everyone wants the returning starters, and everyone would love to have Will Howard back, and Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, all those offensive and defensive linemen, please come back. Yeah, I'd prefer that. But since we can't have it that way, I'm almost glad there's so much turnover. And you know what? If you lose a couple games this year and you bow out in the quarterfinals of the playoffs, so be it. But for the long-term trajectory of this team, you know, Julian's saying in 2026, and this wide receiver core, this offensive and defensive line group in 2026, I like it. Like, I like that you turn over so much of the topsoil. Just rip that Band-Aid off. Whatever the Band-Aid is covering at Ohio State. FanDuel has their odds up right now, and their over-under win total is 10.5. Just for the record, they're still the favorite to win the Big Ten. They're plus 600 to win it all. You can bet all that right now, FanDuel. So this is not a poverty program all of a sudden. Speaking of FanDuel, exclusive odds provider of the show. QR code there right now. I mean, what do we have? We got basketball conference tournaments coming up. We got the NCAA tournament coming up. We got all sorts of things. But we also have a futures market in college football, ready, willing, and available to be bet on over there. FanDuel is the exclusive odds provider of the show. We are very proud to partner with them. We appreciate them. Had all kinds of really good intel from them last season. If you were watching then, that we were ahead of the curve on. Why? Because we can pick up the phone and call them. We had, I kid you not, we have standing meetings with the FanDuel traders. Those are the people who set the numbers, where I just get to pepper them with questions. It's like a dream scenario for someone who's fascinated by that stuff. And it's a great access. It's a great tool to have, and I share as much of that as I can with our audience. Okay, last thing on the show tonight. We haven't really talked about this a great deal. Appreciate you guys being tuned in live, by the way. Really good number for tonight. Really good number. So I wanted to hit this. Sean up in Buffalo, New York said, an unintended consequence of NIL in the portal seems to be impacting college football spring games. Is there an ideal way to save our precious Saturday in the spring? Sean is mentioning this because Texas, no spring game. USC, no spring game. Nebraska, they're scrapping their spring games. Now, Sean said something there that sounds very childlike and very innocent. He said, our precious Saturday in the spring, we're losing it. Where is it going? I want to say something. I have noticed many people in our space, our college football media space, and some fans as well, who have been knocking this concept. Some people who want to sound intellectually superior to the rest of the room out there. They keep saying things like, oh, we're not really losing anything. I never really watched more than one or two spring games anyway. Yeah, that's the point. That's the point here. A South Carolina fan only watches the South Carolina spring game. That's one out of 124. If they cancel it, you're absolutely taking something from them. This is an event, by the way, that a lot of families build their spring around. That Saturday in the spring offers an opportunity for an Alabama family of 5 from Trussville to go up to Tuscaloosa because they can't afford to do it when LSU's in town. So it's also a time for those who can't make it home for homecoming in the fall to take the family back to campus. People who don't get to experience it in the fall because it's above their means of income. They get to do it in the spring. It's not nothing when you take these things away. So then the follow-up question is, okay, but in the real world, it's happening. Steve Sarkisian at Texas talked about this the other day, and he made a point that we've made for a while. He said, we played 4 more games this past year than we would have. We just finished our season. So from a workload perspective, I don't necessarily know that we want to do spring the way we've always done it. And then I was with Matt Rule the other day. We had him on the show for an hour, and one of the first things I asked him was, you've been very vocal about this. Like, Rule didn't wait, man. Rule was ahead of everyone else. He said, I don't care if anyone's spoken about this. We're going to cancel our spring game. Then a bunch of other people followed suit. It was like they didn't want to be first. They didn't want to be third, if you will. Here's what Matt Rule had to say about this.
The romantic spring of college football is long gone. So what actually makes sense in 2025 for Nebraska?
We had our spring game, and it was highly televised. It was played on repeat over and over and over again. All of a sudden, the portal, I had guys getting hit up in the portal to leave. And it wasn't based on what they had done in the fall. And, so I said to myself, like, what's the point of giving away information? To put a game on TV while it's fun, while it's something that, as a player at Penn State, I loved, I'm giving away a lot of information that's proprietary. And new coordinators, why I just don't know why I would do it.
Do I love it? No. And I was sitting 5 feet from him. Do I love it? No. Do I get it? Yeah. Would I do the same thing? Possibly. So I can't necessarily criticize it. USC canceled theirs, and they said, well, an insider with the program said something along the lines of, we think we can engage fans in a better way. So Sark says we're not going to have one because the schedule has it not making sense anymore. Rule's saying, well, we got tampered with last year because we played a spring game in front of 60,000 people, and then teams came after our players in the post-spring portal window. Why would we voluntarily do a showcase for other teams to take our players? USC's like, a spring game is just a showcase for the fans anyway, so we think we can do something better for the fans than the spring game. Okay, I'm all for keeping an open mind on this and allowing some good ideas to pop up out there. But I've told you what my plan is. Like if I were college football commissioner, the way I'd handle spring is unchanged. I wouldn't force you to play a game. I would not have a post-spring transfer portal window, so you don't have to worry about your players leaving after spring ball because it's insane to have a post-spring portal window. I would have seasons done by early January. Playing a national championship game January 23rd or 24th, like we're going to do this upcoming year, is also insane. So you wouldn't be ending your season, taking a couple of weeks off, and then going right into spring ball. And here's what else I'd do. I still believe this. It's ridiculous for you to be playing FCS teams in the fall. What wouldn't be ridiculous is if I took our media partners and I put, $1 million on the line for each of you, if you will agree, Texas A&M, to schedule Sam Houston State for your spring game, and let's make a little event out of it. And so Sam Houston, the FCS team, still gets their paycheck. You get an event that your fan base gets to go and watch, and it doesn't count. The outcome's not really counting for your record, but if you want to do that, I'm going to subsidize it. Me, ESPN, CBS, NBC, Fox, I'm going to pay you a little extra if you'll agree to do that because it puts inventory on my shelf in the spring. And if you don't want to do it, that's fine. Do whatever you want to do. No one's forcing you to do it. But if you'll agree to do it, I'm going to make it a little extra worth your while, if you will. That's the way I wish spring was. I can't believe we never got to that point where actual quasi-games could happen in the spring, where we took the FCS tomato can like cupcake week from the fall and made it happen for the spring game instead, knowing it doesn't count towards record, but it's good. It's like a solid, tangible football product to end spring, and I don't know. I always laugh when people say, well, we don't want to play the spring game because we don't want to get guys hurt. You telling me you're not scrimmaging? You're not going full 11 on 11, good on good, enclosed practices in spring and fall? You're doing that for a portion of every practice. You guys are doing that. Get guys hurt in the spring game. What, because people are sitting in the stands, a guy's more likely to get hurt? Someone make sense of that to me. Time's up. You can't. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll be here Tuesday night instead of Thursday night. For Direct Colin, for producer Jesse, I'm Josh Pate. Have a great start to your week. Take care and God bless.